Did you know that one of the world's most beloved singer-songwriters walked away from millions of dollars in global superstardom because of a near-death experience that lasted just minutes? You'll never believe what happened to Cat Stevens on a Malibu beach in 1975 that would cause him to abandon his entire music career, auction off his guitars, and disappear from the spotlight for nearly 3 decades. This isn't just about a celebrity finding religion. This is about a man who made a promise to God while drowning in the Pacific Ocean and actually kept it, even when it cost him everything. But what really happened in those terrifying moments will change how you see faith forever. In the early 1970s, Cat Stevens was living every musician's dream. His songs, Wild World, Peace Train, Father and Son weren't just hits. They were anthems that defined a generation. With his gentle voice and philosophical lyrics, the London-born singer-songwriter had become one of the most successful artists in the world, selling millions of albums and filling concert halls across the globe. But behind the success, Cat Stevens was struggling with questions that his fame couldn't answer. Despite his hit songs about peace and spiritual searching, he felt spiritually empty. The man whose music spoke about finding meaning was desperately seeking meaning himself. His 1970 album T4 The Tillerman had made him a superstar, but it hadn't made him happy. Little did he know that a simple swim in the Pacific Ocean was about to change everything. Malibu Beach, California. Cat Stevens, at the height of his fame, decided to take a relaxing swim in the Pacific Ocean. It was supposed to be a peaceful moment away from the pressures of stardom. The water was inviting, the California sun was perfect, and Stevens felt the rare luxury of being just another person enjoying the beach. But as he swam further from shore, the gentle waves began to change. What started as a leisurely swim quickly turned into a fight for survival as a powerful riptide began pulling him away from the beach. The beloved singer who had written about peace and tranquility suddenly found himself in the grip of the ocean's merciless power. Panic set in as he realized he was being swept out to sea with no hope of swimming back to safety. As the shoreline disappeared behind him and exhaustion began to set in, Cat Stevens faced the very real possibility that he was about to die. In those desperate moments, fighting against the current that was pulling him toward the open ocean, something profound happened. The man who had spent his career writing about spiritual questions suddenly found himself crying out to God with absolute sincerity. "Oh God, if you save me, I will work for you." Stevens screamed into the wind and waves, his voice raw with terror and desperation. This wasn't a casual prayer or a hopeful wish. This was a life-or-death bargain made by a drowning man who understood. He had no control over his fate. But what happened next defied all logic and would haunt Stevens for the rest of his life. Just as Cat Stevens felt his strength giving out and the ocean preparing to claim him forever, something impossible happened. A single, gentle wave, completely different from the violent current that had been dragging him out to sea, lifted him up and carried him directly back toward shore. In minutes, he went from certain death to safety on the beach. Stevens lay, gasping on the sand, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. The same ocean that had been pulling him to his death had suddenly, inexplicably, delivered him to safety. But more than his life had been saved in those moments, his promise to God echoed in his mind with the weight of absolute commitment. He had made a deal with the divine, and now he had to figure out what it meant. But fulfilling that promise would prove more challenging than he ever imagined. After his near-death experience, Cat Stevens couldn't shake the feeling that he owed God something extraordinary. But what exactly did working for God mean for a pop star? He began exploring different spiritual paths, studying various religions and philosophies, searching for the truth that would help him understand his miraculous rescue. The search wasn't easy. Stevens read Buddhist texts, studied Christian theology, and explored various mystical traditions. Nothing seemed to provide the complete answer he was seeking. Then, in 1976, his brother David gave him a gift that would change his life forever: a copy of the Quran. As Stevens began reading the Islamic holy book, He felt something he had never experienced before, a complete spiritual awakening that answered every question he had been asking. Reading the Quran was unlike any spiritual experience Cat Stevens had ever had. The text spoke directly to his heart, answering questions about God, purpose, and spiritual truth that he had been struggling with for years. The Islamic teachings about submission to Allah, the importance of prayer, and the concept of living life as an act of worship resonated deeply with the promise he had made while drowning. Stevens studied Islamic principles with the same intensity he had once devoted to songwriting. He learned about the 5 pillars of Islam, studied Arabic, and began to understand that his promise to work for God had a specific meaning in Islamic terms. The man who had written Peace Train discovered that Islam literally meant peace. Through submission to God, everything was falling into place, but his decision would shock the world. December 1977. Cat Stevens formally converted to Islam, becoming the first major Western pop star to embrace the faith publicly. He chose the Islamic name Yusuf Islam, inspired by the story of the prophet Yusuf in Arabic and his journey from hardship to spiritual triumph. The man who had sung about finding peace had finally found it in submission to Allah. The music industry was stunned. Fans were confused. Media outlets struggled to understand how someone could walk away from such massive success for religion. But for Yusuf, the conversion wasn't about leaving something behind. It was about finally finding what he had been searching for all along. His promise to God was being fulfilled, but the most shocking decision was still to come. In one of the most shocking moves in music history. Yusuf Islam auctioned off his guitars for charity, officially ending his career as Cat Stevens. The instruments that had created some of the most beautiful songs of the 1970s were sold to raise money for Islamic causes and humanitarian work. Fans watched in disbelief as their beloved singer-songwriter, K, literally gave away the tools of his trade. The auction wasn't just symbolic. It was Yusuf's way of demonstrating complete commitment to his new path. He wasn't just converting to Islam. He was dedicating his entire life to serving Allah. The man who could have continued making millions from his music chose instead to use his wealth, talents for spiritual and charitable purposes. But this decision came with a cost that few could understand. For nearly 30 years, the world waited for Cat Stevens to return. His greatest hits continued to play on radio stations, his albums continued to sell, but Yusuf Islam remained committed. To his spiritual path, he focused on educating Muslim children, supporting humanitarian causes, and raising his family according to Islamic principles. During this period, Yusuf wasn't hiding from the world. He was serving Allah in ways that didn't require public attention. He founded Islamic schools, supported charitable organizations, and became a respected voice in the Muslim community. The man who had once sought fame was now content with anonymity, finding fulfillment in living according to his faith rather than entertaining the masses. But global events would eventually call him back to music. Throughout his years away from music, Yusuf Islam never forgot the power of songs to teach and inspire. He began writing and performing Islamic songs for children, creating educational music that helped young Muslims learn about their faith. These weren't pop songs. They were spiritual tools designed to serve. By educating the next generation of believers. The quality of these children's songs was extraordinary, proving that Yusuf's musical gifts hadn't diminished during his years away from secular music. Parents and children in the Muslim community embraced his educational recordings. And slowly, Yusuf began to see how music could be part of his service to Allah rather than a distraction from it. His understanding of his promise to God was evolving. The Bosnian War of the 1990s deeply affected Yusuf Islam. Witnessing the suffering of Muslim families in Bosnia, he felt compelled to use his talents to raise awareness and funds for humanitarian relief. For the first time since his conversion, Yusuf considered returning to mainstream music not for personal gain, but as a tool for serving Allah by helping others. He realized that his promise to work for God might actually include using his musical gifts, but for spiritual rather than commercial purposes. The man who had walked away from music began to understand that perhaps Allah wanted him to return to it, but on very different terms. His perspective on faith and art was about to undergo another transformation, after nearly 3 decades away from secular music. Yusuf Islam released Another Cup, his first mainstream album since his conversion. But this wasn't a return to his old life. It was an evolution of his spiritual journey. The album contained songs that reflected his Islamic faith while appealing to his global audience. The world welcomed back the voice they had missed for so long, but Yusuf was clear about his motivations. He wasn't returning for fame or money. He was using his platform to promote peace, understanding, and spiritual reflection. His music had always been about searching for meaning. Now it was about sharing the meaning he had found in Islam. Yusuf's return to music created a unique challenge. How does a devout Muslim navigate the secular music industry while maintaining his spiritual principles? The answer lay in his understanding that art could be a form of worship when used to promote positive values and bring people closer to spiritual truth. He carefully selected songs that aligned with Islamic values, performed at venues that respected his faith practices, and used his concerts as opportunities to promote peace and understanding between different cultures and religions. The man who had once abandoned music for Allah was now using music to serve Allah in a different way. His journey had come full circle, but with a deeper purpose. Today, Yusuf Islam stands as proof that it's possible to maintain spiritual integrity while engaging with the secular world. His decision to leave music at the height of his fame, then return on his own terms, demonstrates a level of faith-based commitment that few celebrities have ever shown. His story challenges the assumption that religion and art must be in conflict. Instead, Yusuf has shown how spiritual devotion can transform art into something more meaningful than entertainment. It can become a vehicle for promoting peace, understanding, and spiritual growth. His journey from Cat Stevens to Yusuf Islam and back to Yusuf Cat Stevens represents one of the most authentic spiritual transformations in modern popular culture. The most powerful aspect of Yusuf Islam's story isn't found in any of his songs. It's in the life he lived after making his promise to Allah on that Malibu beach. For 30 years, he demonstrated that fame, fortune, and artistic success mean nothing compared to spiritual truth and divine purpose. When Cat Stevens cried out to God while drowning in the Pacific Ocean, he made a promise that would cost him his career, his fortune, and his fame. But in return, he gained something infinitely more valuable: spiritual peace, divine purpose, and the knowledge that he had kept his word to Allah. His greatest composition wasn't Wild World or Peace Train. It was the life he built in service to God. Yusuf Islam's journey from pop superstardom to Islamic devotion and back to purposeful music demonstrates that true success isn't measured in album sales or concert attendance. It's measured in faithfulness to the promises we make to God in our most desperate moments. The man who almost drowned in Malibu didn't just survive, he discovered what it truly means to live. And in keeping his promise to work for Allah, Cat Stevens became Yusuf Islam and showed the world what it looks like when someone chooses spiritual truth over worldly success. Sometimes the greatest music comes not from what we sing, but from how we live, and Yusuf Islam's life has been his masterpiece.